Wow. Really, all I can say is wow. It's not often a game that is so positive, bursting with life, and nearly perfect in every way comes onto the stage. But Yakuza, like a dragon, is absolutely that in every way. It's funny to think that much like the game's hero by the name of Ichiban, Yakuza 7 was the underdog, untrusted and lacking anyone's approval in the beginning. But the second you start the game, you'll realize there is so much more to it. Like a Dragon takes the series in a new, fresh direction, with not only a new main character, cast, and location, but also lots of new side quests, and most notably to fans of the previously majorly beat-em-up focused series, a focus on JRPG game mechanics instead. But let's focus on the story first, because it's generally the best part of the game, outside of the wonderful and colorful cast of lovable misfits that you'll meet on the adventure. After taking the fall for a member of his Yakuza family, Ichiban Kasuga is sent to prison for 18 years. After being released, he finds the world he remembers gone, and those he cared for vanishing from his life. Worst of all, the man he has looked up to almost all of his life ends up betraying him from the other side of a smoking barrel. After being brought back from the brink of death, Ichiban teams up with an ex-detective, a disgraced nurse, a bar mama, and quite a few other compelling and misunderstood characters to find out what is truly going on, while a political conspiracy that threatens all of Japan looms over a brewing war between three rival gangs. After getting a job and witnessing their boss be murdered in cold blood, the gang finds a malevolent scheme much larger than themselves begin to unfold before their very eyes, and they set off to try and make peace between three rival factions, all the while solving their boss's murder. But that's just the start. It's a plot involving the governor of Tokyo, an overzealous purity group, and a militant Yakuza group all close in for personal control over a once protected zone. The story here, like every other game in the series, is vast and winding with twists and turns found in every Yokohama pathway. Sharing too much of the story here would give away how perfectly it is all set up and executed, but there will be a spoiler section later on for those who have played the game or are just interested in what all is going on. What I will say is this is easily one of the most upbeat games I have played in a good long while, and it lacks any cynicism you might expect from something that tries to tackle both the good and bad of life. Despite a lot of heavy subject matter, the game showcases that just because there might be some bad in life, it doesn't mean that life itself is bad or not worth living. It's hopeful and bright, but never preaches to the audience, still managing to have some genuinely heartbreaking scenes among all the positivity. Ichiban Kasuga is honestly what makes the entire game work as well as it does, and if he wasn't the star, I can't see the game working like it should, or feeling as tight as it does. Not only is Ichiban a much more proactive protagonist compared to Kiryu, but everything he does makes sense. He's a chipper, overly imaginative Dragon Quest otaku who just wants to be seen as the hero and help those in need. And let me just say, this helps the entire game come together perfectly. See, Ichiban is an overly thoughtful dork who has an imagination that would put most people to shame. While most other Yakuza games have occasionally silly moments sprinkled in the main story and plenty of out there side quests without any real reason, Like a Dragon wears these oddities on its sleeve and gives them all a feasible reason for being there. Ichiban's excitement and sense of adventure. Here, every silly side quest and overblown set piece makes complete and utter sense. Even some of the other characters point out Ichiban overblowing things in his head.
Yeah, I think he's in a bad mood. Is that literally fire coming out of him? That's your gamer brain talking again. But fire or not, oh, he's angry as hell.
And while this starts fairly early in the game with the introduction of the RPG combat system, it's truly tapped into when one of Ichiban's new friends by the name of Namba indulges him a bit with the discovery of an Excalibur-like baseball bat that can only be wielded by a true hero. Almost all the sub-stories are made to be grandiose adventures, with Ichiban going out of his way to help the down-on-their-luck residents of Injicho. From putting a stop to supposed masked slasher villains, to fighting a monstrous Roomba of doom, all the way to granting people the power of super speed due to spicy kimchi, anything explainable by actual logic is thrown out the window, replaced by the schoolyard fantasies of our shrub-haired hero. Almost every sub-story is completely absorbing for the 3 or so parts they go for, save for the really dull and almost annoying ones such as the traffic census job, but those are few and far between, and overall the side stories make for a nice distraction from the addicting and absorbing main story. But with that said, let's get back to the star. Ichiban Kasuga is a motivated beam of sunshine, and it's so nice seeing a protagonist always stay optimistic. Every character is simply perfect, and I rooted for everyone here a whole lot. I was actually surprised that some of the party members later on were characters who stood against the ragtag group of heroes, and through various chats with them, they grew to be amazing additions to the already strong cast. I can't think of a single character on the extended good side I disliked, from the stern yet fatherly chairman Hiroshino to the flamboyant and often hilarious Nick Ogata, right down to some other surprising members who joined Ichiban that I don't want to spoil. Needless to say, I loved everyone and was heartbroken whenever anything bad befell them. But the heroes are only as good as the villains opposing them, and the villains here were darn nasty and hateable in all the right ways. What made them even better was despite them being vile and genuinely bad people, they still had an odd sense of humanity to them that gave their actions more weight. Thankfully, even when giving them some tragedy, it never asked the player to sympathize enough to forgive them fully, and I was glad that Ichiban, while still being a good person, made sure their crimes didn't go unpunished. There was also a massive amount of people who were touched by Ichiban's kindness and befriend him, either by joining his business or even coming to fight by his side, all of whom you meet through the game's many sub-stories. They, like everyone else, all have tragic and heartwarming tales, and I was glad to meet everyone, from the sweet, charitable Megumi to the wacky and pure-hearted Onimichi, right down to the tragic and tear-inducing Kiedi. Like a Dragon is a fantastic entry point for people looking to get into JRPGs that are fluid and fast-paced, save for the horrendous difficulty spikes that occasionally crawl in to ruin your fairly fluid progress. Now, most people tend to look down on this comparison, but you can feel both Persona 5 and Dragon Quest DNA here, along with Mario RPG and many other inspirations for the rest of the gameplay I'll talk about here in a bit. You have the Sega system at your command, which is a set of 4 options, along with sub-options and menus for every letter save for guard. You have your basic attacks, your special magic-like skills, which are all comically average things blown way out of proportion, like, for example, using alcohol in a lighter as a fireball, or tasers for electric damage, and you also have your etc tab, which grants you items you can use to heal or boost stats for battle. It's fairly standard Japanese RPG fare, but what really sells it is all the spectacle and flair, along with the attention to silly detail given to everything. All of your weapons, outside of a few very special things saved for characters they make sense with, are things you could find laying around the street. Baseball bats, sharp rulers, and other such things are what Ichiban and gang employed as weapons, and as you journey, you'll get better and stronger equipment. Over the course of the game, as you level up yourself and your friendships, you'll unlock more and more jobs, which essentially act as the game's classes. You start off fairly weak, but the more you train under them, the better they get, and the more skills you can keep permanently for use outside that job. Another nice thing is you can change these whenever you'd like, with no punishment, and you can also change your in-battle only costume, which added a lot of flair to combat. Battles are fairly easy, with some enemies naturally being a bit stronger than other more common foes, but rarely ever do they become anything I'd call tedious. Random battles aren't so random, as you can even avoid them completely if you want to by either using a store or getting equipment that turns them off. Instead of being fully random like other games, enemy encounters will simply be groups of baddies roaming the streets, and it will even give you a moment to avoid them if they spot you if you're quick enough. Boss battles are, for the majority of the time, a comfy challenge you will have fun battling. That is, right up until you meet and fight the Mad Dog himself. No spoilers for the context here, but yes, you fight some legendary Yakuza characters, and needless to say, while it's cool they are here and not relegated to shitty DLC like another well-known RPG using its legendary characters for such a thing, this fight is generally the hardest in the entire game, and while it's cool to watch, unless you grind for a few hours before the fight, you're in for a very bad time, and this is the only time in the game that it actually requires any sort of grinding, which is sort of uncomfortable and jarring, especially when the rest of the game is so well balanced. Over the course of the game, you'll meet recognizable fan-favorite characters who all join your ranks as summonable attacks or power-ups known as pound mates. These were all incredible and very useful for most battles, and while they cost a healthy sum of money early on, when you are finally making bank, you can summon them whenever as long as they aren't on cooldown to aid you in combat. They were all amazing, and while I loved watching them, thankfully the game understands that your time is important, and if you're grinding, you can skip the display of action and just get the damage numbers. Other minor things for major gameplay include things like the one-and-done chase scene at the beginning, which is a mechanic that never comes back ever again, which I found odd since there were a few moments I thought it might come back, like in the quest to get a young boy's gift back. You also get the ability to strike an enemy if they are knocked down with a follow-up attack if your friendship is high enough with a nearby ally. Early on, you get a skeleton key to unlock all the silver safes lying around, but to get gold keys, you'll have to use a special skill granted by a later on job that unlocks a black market. You also get the ability to rummage through trash and under things to look for money and items if you so need to. In terms of the controls, the game controlled smoothly, outside of whenever you need to interact with anything, which would require you to be in a very precise spot, or else you wouldn't get the prompt. This could be frustrating, but thankfully the controls themselves felt decent outside of that. Also, the menus in terms of controls and how they read were a bit clunky. Nothing major, but visually the menus did take some getting used to know exactly where everything was. Oh, and having the ability to press either the X or R2 button to sprint without tapping was really nice, and if you gently push the stick forward instead of holding it, you would jog instead of full-on run. Ichiban could also vault over some obstacles like safety rails, but would just collide with other things like certain fences, and it would just be a gamble to see if it worked or not. Also, to keep the combat interesting, you don't just go through the attack menus, as with certain attacks, depending on what the skill is, you might need to mash the square button or carefully press the triangle button at the proper time. The latter takes some time to learn when the correct timing is, but once you do, it's a lot of fun to use. Same goes for the special perfect guard, where if you manage to hit the circle button when the enemy attacks, you will have reduced damage dealt to you instead of the full-on blow. Also, partway through the game, you'll get an app on your phone from the Sujimon Professor, a fun riff on Pokemon.
Let's just say they're assistants who specialize in field work. Now what's your favorite color? Red, blue, or green? Yes, in fact I do. Every time you wallop an enemy, the Sujidex app kicks in. It records battle data automatically.
That's freaking nuts.
Gentlemen, I choose you! Get ready for a Sujimon battle! Impressive! Clearly, I chose the right people for the job. Keep that up and you'll be the best, like no one ever was. Don't forget, the world's counting on you. So you gotta dispatch them all! Then you'll be the next Sujimon Master!
Which will allow you to view and learn about all the enemies you'll be beating away. This was a nice addition to have, because it was basically collectible models that will be sure to please any still upset Super Smash Bros. Fans out there. Also, in terms of collectible data, you can also get info on all the characters you meet too. Things such as the fast travel being taxis is great, but having to find them and talk to them instead of them instantly unlocking when you're near them, along with no markings on the taxi fast travel map, was really annoying. There was also a stealth section later in the game, and this was really annoying too, but thankfully it was short. The stealth idea worked in Persona 5, but here, it should have been one of the things they didn't try to include at all. Oh, and funny thing is that yes, you can get hit by cars in both battle and exploring if you leave the sidewalk. This goes for enemies as well. You can save anywhere as long as you're not in a dungeon, and in most dungeons there are checkpoints and save stations where you can save and heal. If it's a story-based dungeon, there will be paid checkpoints where if you die, you can choose one of them and pay a sum of the in-game money to respawn at differing levels of health or locations. When not out battling evil, you'll be able to relax at the humorously named Survive Jazz Bar, or any other safe house locations you might have unlocked, and listen to music, which was sort of an underwhelming feature, as despite there being some amazing music and references, you could only really listen to it if you stood in the downstairs and never talked to anyone. You can also ask the all-too-familiar barkeep to make you food, rest, sing karaoke with your friends, and of course rank up your social links with your allies and friends over a drink to solve their problems. Yes, there is indeed a social mechanic here where you have 5 ranks where you talk to your friends after leveling up their affection bar. They are overarching stories where you get to know the cast quite a bit better before having a heartwarming and usually action-focused wrap-up to their tale, along with unlocking a super special move. Oh, and if you're lucky, you can win over a waifu if you're lucky enough to meet them and meet the conditions that they have. Also, like Persona, there are character personality points, like charisma, intelligence, that sort of thing, that open up new routes, powers, and people to talk to. It's worth leveling up these stats at least a little bit, and it's nice that most questions and ways to rank up each skill make sense. There is actually a character you can only unlock through completing a sub-story and minigame where you manage a company by the name of Thierry. She's a great addition, even though she has no real impact on the story at all, and she never shows up in any cutscenes not related to the business, and also wasn't even programmed to have facial features in the side conversations you can have with her when going to landmarks.
So I always clean up my room before I turn it on. My house has been sparkling clean ever since I brought him home.
Yes, among all the major side activities, one is running a business, but thankfully, as I found out, this is far easier to do than it first appears, as the tutorial for this is complete garbage. Basically, you'll just want to wait before engaging it, as the more sub-stories you do, and random people you talk to on the street, the better employees will join Ichiban Confections, and later Ichiban Holding. Once you get some good employees, put them to work in your properties, and watch the cash roll in. After 4 business cycles, you have to battle shareholders in what is essentially over-the-top and glorified rock, paper, scissors, and attrition wars, while you try to win them over to fund your company, all while a shadowy group of business suits try to stop you from reaching number 1. This side activity wasn't bad, and it brings you in a lot of cash. It's just very brain dead past a certain point. Do all that while making sure your employees get training and proper care, and there you go. After 3+ hours of grinding, you'll be number 1. Also make sure to get that commercial spot, as it's one of the funniest things in the entire game.
I'm so hungry!
Here you go!
Ichiban Senpai! Whoa! Aren't you President Ichiban from Ichiban Confections?
I sure am!
There are also countless other things to do, one major one being becoming an everyday hero, where you beat up specific thugs to rescue people and help turn in items people might request. This is just here for good XP and cash numbers, but it was fun seeing all the reasons people were being attacked and harassed. But not to worry, if those don't sound appealing, there are plenty of other game modes, such as the fully playable emulated copies of Sega games, like Outrun, Virtua Fighter 2, and so much more, along with absolutely addicting virtual crane games that showcase that while my vices aren't things things like drinking or the like, I lose myself in the addiction of wanting to win cute prizes, because trust me, I've been there. There was also the new addition of a very simple yet completely functional kart racer called Dragon Kart, which is, yes, basically Yakuza Mario Kart, complete with its own set of sub-stories. The racing here is fun, but I found myself always in first place, which means the only power-up I used was the boost. There were things like machine guns, rocket launchers, and other things, but I never used them. You could also collect gold gears that fix up your cart of choice, along with give you points to use at the gift shop. Do you like Pac-Man? Well, here Ichiban is tasked with cleaning up the streets in a very familiar feeling minigame, where you ride around picking up cans, avoiding terrifyingly friendly sounding garbage trucks, and ramming into other homeless guys to become the king of cans, which gives you points for, you guessed it, more items. There was also the battle tower where you could grind for items, money, and XP, and while this was fun, you'll definitely want to put on a podcast while doing this, as it becomes mind-numbing really fast. There were also the sewers, but I found these to just be a waste of time unless you were dead set on finding all the secrets that they held. Also, speaking of secrets, there are quite a few locations around the map that only open up after specific story moments, so always try to visit these. Speaking of leveling up skills, there was the pain in the ass vocational school, which is basically just the quizzes from Persona's classroom sections, except these cost a big chunk of money and actually can be studied for if you fail. However, since I have horrid test anxiety and didn't care much for wanting to constantly reload my save, which was a pain in the ass to do since you have to go back to the main menu to do so, I just looked up a guide online. Oh, and the final test has questions from every test, so I constantly tabbed out of the game and Control plus F the answer because I really didn't care all that much about trivia for things like the ungodly teachings of math. Stores came in many varieties, and while it does take a while to start earning efficiently, you'll get your hands on a lot of money and other goods to trade at the stores and eateries around town, and sometimes you'll even be lucky to get special bonus points or conversations at certain restaurants if you order the right meal, which was a nice touch at making me want to eat at each place that was on the map. You can also go to hostess bars, which act as super restaurants, but these are very expensive and they go by really quickly, and you get really drunk at these. But you can level up your hostess's mood, which, you know, is another nice little thing to have in the game. You can also find plenty of collectible materials, which you could bring back to the craft shop to forge new armor and weapons, or even upgrade things you already have. This was a neat inclusion, but I only found myself doing it a couple of times. You can also upgrade the workstation, but this gets pricey really fast, and I just sort of gave up on it past a certain point. Another neat little feature that actually does play into a side mission is the ability to take photos. Rarely ever do I actually play with photo modes in games, but here it was fun to take pics of everything, and also, an amazingly neat detail is some NPCs will react positively or negatively to taking photos with you, and you can take photos of your friends and selfies with filters, which was a fun distraction. Oh, and if you've ever wanted to experience basically what it's like to be me in Japan, you can click the L3 button to enter into first person, and walk around while in this POV, which was a step up from the previous games and very immersive and fun feature to play around with. Visually, the game is very stylized compared to the ultra-realistic visuals of the previous entries, and just comparing Ichiban's model from 6's engine to how he looks now, it's a massive step up. Yokohama really came to life here, with so much scene dressing that it actually became overwhelming in a good way. Some non-usable stores were so alive that I thought they were actually something I could enter, and the world actually pretty much felt like how real-life Japan did, minus the dangerous gangs of deadly bad guys. Ichiban and company were all visually unique, and just on appearances alone, I could tell everyone apart perfectly. Not to mention, the normal job and DLC costumes gave them extra flair in battle, which was fun to see for sure. While I have a bad sense of direction, every inch of Injinsho was memorable, and it was nice to have it be the hub compared to the already visited Osaka and classic Komorocho. Also, I just have to say I adored the 8-bit renditions of the main cast on the loading screens. These were really cute and a fun addition to the game. All the bad guys and bosses were just a treat, because there was over 225 different enemy varieties to encounter, and outside of a few very similar variants, they all looked vastly different, and it kept the flowing encounters varied and fun, and the bosses all had a lot of flavor, even though they looked as they did in cutscenes. What was really neat is that Ichiban's overactive imagination is why the enemies morph into exaggerations of what they would be in real life. Things like crazed otaku, camouflaging shutterbug, and lots of over-the-top stereotypes were fun to see. The game ran well 98% of the time, with a major freeze at the beginning.
Take a fucking hit!
And a couple odd stutters here and there that apparently just happen on any system the game is on. And there was occasional slowdown when the smoke effects were heavily used by enemies in battle, but none of this ruined the game, mind you. It was all just a bit jarring when it happened, but it didn't happen enough to ruin my entire experience. Audio-wise, I did commit the sin of playing the game in English, but this was more so because I know most newcomers will play this in English instead of the sub, and wanted to give it a fair review. Outside of some drawn-out overacting and barely acting from a certain YouTuber who thinks acting like a kid being tough is a new voice,
I don't know if okay is the right word. But I seem to be doing better than you, at least.
everyone did a pretty darn good job. Well, there were some dreadful performances from the side quests.
Please, my super perm friend. Oh, the pain's getting worse by the click. Oh.
Like I give a shit. Just buy the little snot more. We need that formula right now.
But if you insist on stopping me, then I'm just gonna have to practice on you, boss.
No, it's not that. Dad's been working really hard ever since Mom passed away. I can't blame him for forgetting.
But these could be overlooked because I only dealt with them once or twice at most. I do want to say that it was cool that they managed to bring back most of the original voice cast from the only other dubbed Yakuza game, not counting Judgment, with the omission of Mark Hamill as Majima. One small nitpick I have is that there were many undubbed lines where the characters would go back to talking in Japanese.
If you haven't... If you have any questions...
And this was just lazy, honestly. And while I understand not having every line dubbed, at least make sure I don't get vocal whiplash, okay, Sega? But besides that, yes, I did like the English dub. And it actually was better in some places. Like the previously mentioned Ichiban Confections commercial, which included a fitting jingle this time around.
First in smiles, Ichiban Confections.
And the jokes landed a lot better in terms of delivery in a lot of moments.
Kitty! Granny! Get away from there!
Preparing to sight. Preparing to sight.
This must be what hell looks like.
We could be on a family vacation for all they know. I'd be the little sister.
All right, then I'm Sachan's big bro.
Oh, I guess that makes me the bigger big bro.
Adachi-san, there's only one thing you could pass for.
You'd be the dad.
Well, I guess that's just how it goes sometimes.
You can do it, Papa.
Hey, Pop, can I have some money?
Don't get ahead of yourself, you little shit.
Damn, Pop's an asshole. So what is that? A Jungi bun?
Wait, what did you just say?
So what is that? Jungi Han?
Did you not just say Jungi Bun?
Of course not. You must be hearing things.
All right, then. My mistake.
Ooh, that was close. I knew the opportunity was ripe for a bread pun, but I can't believe that's what I went with.
I know I heard Jungi Bun, and that's not bad. But you could do better. How about Ichiban Kasuga?
That's the same pun. At least change it up a little.
Ah, see? I knew you said Jungi Bun.
Enough with the buns and the puns. Just shut up and eat your bread.
Sorry.
Wait, why am I apologizing?
The music was just so good. Every track, save for the overly sappy and sad ones, were just literal music to my ears, and the fact that as the game went on, more tracks began to play was a darn nice thing to hear.
Pedal to the metal! Let's go! Time to tear it up. Thank you! Check this out! I'm up! Let's go! I got this!
The ambience for the world is fantastic, and the sounds, outside the repeated rubbing fabric and footstep sounds, all increase the atmosphere immensely. Now we'll be getting into some spoilers, so turn away if you want to avoid these. Everyone who wants to avoid being spoiled gone? Good. Alright, here we go. I was absolutely heartbroken when both Arakawa and Hiroshino were killed off, and the violence for the deaths in the game were surprisingly brutal. I love that Kashiwagi is the barkeep and named the bar after his survival, and there were so many moments that warmed my heart, but my favorite had to be when the game defended Ichi against Arakawa out of worry. Speaking of the gang, I was happy and surprised surprised that both Zhao and Jungi Han joined up with Ichiban and became its friend, as both were fantastic additions to the cast. I also have to say that I adored the scene with Kiro showing up at the Yakuza meeting as the bodyguard. It just brought such a big smile to my face, and it was an incredibly fun introduction to have him in the game. Also, when fighting Kiro, I laughed way too hard because he's programmed to be completely unable to hit the female party members, but Majima and Sajima go full gamer and hit anyone in their path. Just a funny detail, and goodness gracious did I love the scene where Ichiban becomes the Dragon Quest warrior to fight the dragon, before singing the Dragon Quest victory theme. Oh, and the space laser you get is just amazing, as is Majima and Kiro's pound mate attacks. I love the fact that the ending became this massive brawl, and while Tendo was a sponge for damage, he wasn't too hard. The final battle with the governor turned into an over-the-top Metal Gear feeling battle scene, and I couldn't get enough of it. The entire ending was just tragic, but also thankfully very hope-filled as well. But I must say, the scene with Kume coming back one last time, I genuinely did not see coming, and was left agape after that happened. And with all that said, Like a Dragon is an amazing game. Not only does it tell a tragic yet uplifting and fun story, but it's also an amazing RPG with plenty of flair and fun to be had, filled with a memorable and lovable cast, an almost true-to-life virtual location, and plenty of new things on offer after beating the game itself. I'll simply leave you with the knowledge that you should absolutely play the game, whether you're a Yakuza veteran or RPG fan, or even a newcomer to either. I also want to end the video with one final quote from the game itself.
Once you're at rock bottom, the only place to go is up. There's no shame in being at the bottom. All that matters is how you decide to climb back out of the darkness. There's always a ray of hope up there.
As always, if you want to help support the channel, please consider sharing the video with a friend or checking out my Patreon linked in the description below. A big thank you to my wonderful friend Orion Knight for drawing up these wonderful animation stills of Punish Neat. If you have any comments, questions, or recommendations, leave them in the comments as I read and reply to everything. Until next time, this is Thierry Williamson signing off until the next video. See ya guys!